Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello and welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is Phineas Newborn III. Phineas Newborn III, son of famous jazz musician Phineas Newborn Junior, is an actor, dancer, choreographer, and producer whose career highlights include the 1984 breakdancing-themed film Breakin and the Broadway musicals Cats, Starlight Express, Ragtime, A Chorus Line, and Aida. He also starred in films Girls Just Want to Have Fun and the television series Fame. Phineas has also choreographed and performed with Gladys Knight, James Brown, Jasmine Guy, Paula Abdul, Seal, Lenny Kravitz, and many others. As a dance instructor, he has taught in Germany, France, England, Sweden, Japan, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States. His students have worked with icons such as Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Britney Spears, and Prince. I hope you will enjoy the show.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, great to meet you.
It's great to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
What are you doing in your life and career right now?
Well, right now I'm actually retired, happily retired, but kind of semi-retired because I'm still finding, of course, a creative outlet. So I work creating digital video media for my sister's online news media outlet, and I produce also her shows.
Oh, that's wonderful. What is she called and where can we find her?
It's actually a paper that's out of Los Angeles City, and it is a paper that's actually targeting the community that she lives in, and it's a Christian-based newspaper, so it's actually really focusing on just reaching out to the Christian community in Los Angeles.
That's wonderful. What do you do? What do you do for it?
I create digital media video. So basically, I create video content to help promote and support content that's on her website. And also every year she does an annual a First Ladies High Tea, which is first ladies in the church or the wives that are married to the ministers. And she does an event that's about 800 people in a very upscale Beverly Hills hotel. And she offers a high tea menu as well as entertainment from top gospel artists around the country, around the globe, and also a fashion show. And she also invites young women to enter a scholarship contest, a writer's essay contest, and award scholarships to them.
That's wonderful. And
And with that production, I actually call the show. I direct the video, I edit the video, I create the music, I have the play on and play offs of the honorees, and basically I'm kind of like the steering the entire ship for the 3 hours that we're there. So I think a lot of my experience on stage and in front of the camera has paid off because it allowed me to actually understand really how to actually navigate behind the scenes.
of course it does because well, and it still gives you some creativity in your life. It's always good.
A lot of creativity, which is great, which I had no idea when I actually retired how it would find its way out because obviously dancers don't dance forever, and it's an unfortunate thing because when you're younger, you think that you're indestructible and that you're going to be able to do whatever you were doing forever, and that's just not the case. So it was really nice to just see organically how my creativity found its way out in other ways, which is really great.
How did your love for music, dancing, and the art start for you?
Well, actually, you know what? I was born into an artistic family. I'm a part of a lineage, a legacy of jazz musicians. My dad was actually one of the pioneer jazz musicians of our time, and a brilliant genius pianist named Phineas Newborn Junior, same as my name. That's why I'm the third. And basically, I was introduced to music in my household from a very young age. But it wasn't until I was 5 years old, which wasn't very long, that my parents took me to see Oliver in the movie theater. And I said, I want to do that. I want to be on screen. I want to be doing what those kids are doing. And I knew at the age of 5 that I wanted to actually do this as a career. And although my mother wasn't really pleased and happy with me making that decision because she didn't want me to do anything like what my dad did, I really felt like I could because my dad had already shown me an example of being successful in the arts. And I never thought that making a living would be difficult for me. And fortunately enough, I was able to basically sustain a career in the arts and never have to work a 9 to 5, never have to work in retail, never had to work as as a waiter or a host or anything like that. Was always able to make a living doing what I love to do.
I read you went to a very special education to further your talent.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I went to a high school that was very, very well known and very well funded with the arts, Beverly Hills High School. And it's the only high school in Beverly Hills, but of course, as you can imagine, all of the parents of the kids were usually in some form of the industry, whether they were on stage, screen actors, or they were behind the scenes writers or directors or producers or studio executives of any kind. They really invested in our program because they wanted to make sure obviously their kids were getting the top notch performing program. And I was really fortunate enough to be guided by John Ingle, who was our director of our department. And he later, actually, after he retired, became a TV personality and actually was Edward Quartermain on General Hospital for many years. So he actually was really was the most influential in terms of my career, in terms of preparing me for how to actually audition for a show and get a show. So actually, my first show was a chorus line, and I got that show before I graduated high school. And the only reason why I got the show was because they taught us how to audition. And I went to an open audition. I actually cut school. I don't recommend that to everybody, but I did. And I cut high school for that one day and went to the open audition and was given the job that day. And of course, wanted to hopefully graduate. So I told them, I said, well, I haven't graduated high school yet. And they said, well, no problem. We're going to start during the summer, so you'll already be finished. But then 2 weeks later, I got a telephone call saying, we've changed our schedule. We're going to actually start sooner. And if you don't want to take this job that we're offering you, that's fine. We'll just put you on the list. And I said, no, I want to take it. You don't get a Broadway show, and not take it, no matter how old you are. But I was able to actually do all of my finals every morning before rehearsal, and was able to graduate while I was doing a chorus line on the road. I did the bus and truck. So I closed the National Bus and Truck when Michael Bennett was still involved directing it. And that was my first kind of foray into the musical theater world. And Dannii, I was not really a dancer then. I was more of a singer. And I realized having a chorus line being the first major, resume credit, I was going to have to be a dancer. And the actual person who hired me for a chorus line said, you know what, Phineas, if you just focus on ballet until I come there to audition for Cats, which we're doing a Los Angeles premiere of Cats after they open on Broadway. And he says, if you just focus on ballet, I could probably, think that you could get into the show. And he was right. I just focused on ballet, stopped taking all my jazz classes, and just focused on that until I was actually prepared for the audition. And I got into Cats in 1983. So I did chorus line in 1982. No, I did. I got a starring role in the movie Breakin in 1983. It opened in 1984. I got Cats in 1984. Did Cats from 1984 through 86. and then started my teaching career. Because again, like I tell you, I didn't have to do anything else out of the arts. I did, however, realize that I needed alternate business, incomes. And for me, it was better for me to teach than to actually work in any other field, because at least it would allow me to be creative. So I started teaching in Europe. I actually first went to Germany and was living in Munich for 9 months. I was only supposed to be there for 6 weeks, but I stayed. Then went to Paris, taught in Paris for 2.5 years, met my former wife, went to Sweden after that, taught in Sweden, came back to America, opened up my own dance school, just lots of really exciting things, and actually didn't do theater again until about, it must have been at least 10 years later when I got Ragtime. And the only reason why I auditioned for Ragtime is because my former wife was pregnant, and I wanted to make sure I was there for the birth of our child. And my agent called me and she says, Phineas, if you don't want to travel every weekend like you've been traveling and be here and make sure that you're here for your child's birth, I can, put you in for a Ragtime. And I got Ragtime, the world premiere, the US premiere, before they opened on Broadway, which was great. And that was my introduction back into the theater after not being involved in the musical theater for 10 years. And from there, of course, did Aida, with audition for Aida. I did the first version in Atlanta that was called Elaborate Lives. That was a not success. And they basically, tried again with Aida and got the same kind of track. I was ensemble and understudying one of the leads, Mirab, and I was able to get into the show again, and moved to New York again, and just stayed here and have been living here ever since.
Such a journey.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a miraculous journey, but a wonderful one. I mean, I'm grateful for every experience I had in the arts, and I'm grateful to again still consider myself to be a very inspired and motivating artist.
What was some of the experience you had on stage or as a teacher that stand out to you?
Well, on stage, the things that stand out to me are the fact of actually really, especially because I've always done long running shows, is how to make the show fresh and new every time you're doing it. Now, when I was doing Cats, which is a very physical show, and I was playing Pouncival, which was the youngest male kitten in the show, I was always on my knees. And it was a show that was on a rake, I'm sure because of the European style of theater and stages is usually on a rake, but it was very difficult to dance on a rake 8 shows a week, and for 2 years. So after 1 year, which I probably did the show 1 year too long, after my second year of doing the show, I started having back problems because of dancing on the rake. But I think one of the most challenging parts of that show was actually creating it and making it new every night. Because when you're doing the same choreography, singing the same songs, playing the same character every night for a new audience, it becomes challenging to actually find freshness and newness in your performance every night and not be bored, which would, of course, not engage the audience and make them be bored. So I didn't want to do that. So that was the thing. Now, in terms of teaching, the thing that I really valued the most from teaching was being of service and actually seeing my students become professionals, and actually really and really just having the tools that they needed to actually make a living doing it. And that was the most exciting part for me as a teacher, and just recognizing and seeing the potential and the inspiring motivation that I could give to young people to actually pursue their dreams and give them what they needed to actually be able to thrive and succeed.
Oh, but it's also such a wonderful thing being a teacher because all your experience you can pour into them so that they can then start a career and pass on what you taught them. It's a rewarding thing.
Yeah, it was very rewarding, and especially because Dannii, at that point in time, most teachers were not still performing, but I was still working. So what I would do is that I would actually go into my classes and I'd prepare them. I said, there's an audition coming up. We're all going to go. And then if I got it, they'd be like, well, how come you got it? I'd say, these are the things that I did that were maybe different from you. And I was able to actually use it as an opportunity to teach how to audition and how to basically stand out enough to get the job. So I really appreciated that ability to actually be involved as a performer and as a teacher at the same time. I thought that was very special. And again, for me, teaching, the most important addition to dance that I was actually offering was the acting, because I was raised and studied acting very seriously. And so I really brought into the classroom, steps are just steps, but you've got to be telling a story. And every arm, every hand, every foot, every leg has to be a part of what intention you have behind it to actually move the story forward. And so it was very important for me to work with my students as actors, not just as dancers.
True, because well, telling a story through dance is I think one of the hardest things to do, because expressing everything with your body and your face without words and in a choreography is just most exciting and must be so very difficult.
It is very exciting, but it's very scary, because most dancers, the reason why they become dancers is because they don't want to have to talk. They don't want to have to sing. They don't want to have to do anything that actually makes them too stand out. But for me, the most important thing about dance, the most engaging part about dance, is actually pulling an audience in to the story that you're telling. So I would make my students cry. I would make them laugh. I'd make them remember their first love during the choreography. I just really made it very challenging for them to not just be dancers. And I'll give you an example. When I was actually in Japan, because I taught in Japan too, in Tokyo, the Japanese were very much were very different when I first had gotten there. They were very closed and they were very, very respectful, but they basically could repeat and copy everything that you did physically, but it had not the emotional connection to the material. And it wasn't until I had gotten there that I really started to engage them and ask them, do more than just imitate my finger. I want you to understand what's behind the finger and actually make that be more important than the movement. And they finally got to the point where, Dannii, they actually loved it so much. I would make them cry in class, and they felt so liberated. And they were like, oh, this is amazing. This is absolutely incredible. And I kind of introduced a whole nother way of dancing for them. And it wasn't just about imitating and being a part of a chorus, but it was about being an individual and really expressing your individuality through the movement.
That's a wonderful thing, and to break through that and draw out what you want them to have. Great. You also choreographed some famous artists in choreographed. As I saw Gladys Knight, James Brown.
Yes, yes. No, I choreographed for Gladys Knight, I choreographed for Seal, I choreographed for some other artists as well. And I loved choreographing for other artists, because again, it allowed me to kind of step more into the director way of working. And yeah, one of the things I also loved is just, to be able to be working with people like Gladys Knight, a living legend.
Yes.
It's just tremendous. And to be doing TV, I did TV shows with Jay Leno, with Gladys, and danced, of course, with never choreographed, but danced with Paula Abdul, and had some really amazing experiences, as a choreographer as well as a dancer.
Are there any artists you have a special memory of working with?
Elton John, who was the composer of Aida, was very interesting, because he was one of those presences that was bigger than life before you even met him. Obviously, we had all known who Elton John was, and we were kind of terrified when he came to the theater to see it, because if he didn't like something, it was either cut, gone, or changed the next day. And he really didn't allow you to actually have a conversation with him. He would basically just show his feelings based on whether he'd get up and walk out. And when he first came to see the show, he walked out of the show
No.
because he did not like the music that was created for the fashion show segment, the strongest suit segment in Aida. And he really did not feel that it represented his music. And we had done something that was out of the lexicon of Elton John kind of style, and he didn't like it, so he left. So that was the most interesting artist, in terms of that kind of an artist that I actually experienced. And when I actually went on for the first time as the understudy for Merib, it was his first time sitting through the whole show. And that was very, very scary because, of course, if he doesn't like you, it's possible that you're just gone the next day. And so that was just a very exciting and interesting and just a different experience working with somebody in terms of choreographing for Gladys or something like that. Gladys was she's just an awesome professional, and she just is very well rehearsed. Working with Paula Abdul, who's also just a taskmaster, but she only expects what she puts out. And so she expects you to be as committed as she is. I've worked with some really amazing artists, amazing performers that I've had an opportunity to see and to work with and be mentored by. Hinton Battle, who is a 3-time Tony Award winner, just recently passed away. He was a huge influence on my life. Huge. I was one of those mega fans when he was doing Sophisticated Ladies, and I'd show up at the backstage door every single day, Dannii. And I was that obnoxious fan saying, Hinton, how do I get legs up to my head the way that you have legs up to your head? What do I need to do to have your kind of a career? And he really ended up really saying some very important, influential lessons. And as I began to grow in the arts and grow in the career, we became very, very close friends. And it was, a mentor that I really, really respected, not only as a performer, but very much as a friend and as a teacher. He really basically inspired generations of dancers from his and performers, because he was a singer, dancer, actor. And I actually introduced him to an acting school that I was going to when he was living in LA. And we became even closer then. So it wasn't that he was just giving me, I was able to also, inspire and motivate him, which is really a pleasure.
Wonderful connection that two artists can have, and inspiring each other is also one of the greatest things you can do. And I think it's kind of missing these days because connections are fleeting with everyone performing in different
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have a daughter who's 27, and she originally went to LA to pursue a career in dance, but it's changed so much that
Yes.
she became disillusioned with the industry now just because it's so different. And there's so many things. I don't know if I'd be able to do it if I was actually in this generation trying to pursue a career and having to make sure that you have a certain amount of followers and making sure that you have, that you have a social media presence. And it's no longer just about talent and just about your ability to show up at an audition. You have to self-tape your auditions. You don't have very few auditions that you go in person and do. And it's just a different world. And also a lot of the choreographers and the teachers these days are stars from reality television, whether it's So You Think You Can Dance, and they're masters, but they've not really mastered it that much in terms of, they may be amazing dancers, but they really don't really understand how to teach and the difference between that. And a lot of them are so brilliant that they never really learned the basics because they didn't need to, that they're not able to actually work with the person from a foundational point and get them to a professional level. They're only really capable of actually being around advanced, amazing students, to do what they do. And so I think there's a lot that's changed. I don't want to say there's a lot missing, because I think every generation offers and adds something new to the arts. But it's definitely a different experience, and it's harder, I think, for people to be as well trained and motivated as they were when I was studying.
I think so too. People either expect people to already be there when they're getting started, or just cast people on how many followers they have, and not if they are able to do the part, the dance, or whatever it is.
Well, that's the thing that's interesting, because now even when you go to an audition, there's on the sheet that you sign in on, you have a box that says how many followers do you have, Instagram followers you have, TikTok followers you have. And literally the person with the most is the one who gets the job, because they know, the producers, the directors, the product people understand that if that person has the job, they're going to be able to actually reach more people in marketing than the person who may have had the best talent or had the best technique or been the right person. So it's a totally different level in terms of typing. You know, before it used to, you just, I mean, of course, we never liked typing in terms of you know, being too short, too tall, not the right skin color, not the right, not the right technique in terms of ballet technique or jazz technique or tap technique. But now that's a more important criteria to reach than even the technique. You know, so it's really changed. It's really changed. But I understand why the product, you know, people actually prefer to use somebody who's got more of an outreach. It just makes it easier for them to reach more of an audience. But again, it's just different. It's very different.
True, and you think that despite the followers, if an audience goes to the show and thinks they're not right for the part, they're not able to reach the notes or do whatever it is they need to do, and then the followers won't really help the show in the end.
Exactly. Well, obviously, when it comes to Broadway, when it comes to theater, it's still, you still have to hit the notes. So if you get a job, you know, so it's not like they do it so much in theater as much as they do in commercials, in TV, in films. But you know, it is starting to, they are really kind of enforcing you to be able to post on your social media when the opening night is and how good all the fun stuff that you're doing backstage. And you know, so there is that component kind of creeping into the theater, in the theater way of basically working, but it hasn't fully taken over as it has in commercial dance.
I saw a few theater artists complaining about the follower thing already. So sadly, it is seeping into it. It's
Yeah.
I think, well, people could grow their followers so in the end.
Yeah,
They get
exactly.
the
I mean,
part, they can promote it. So
yeah, but that's the thing. It's again, it's kind of like before it was easier. I mean, it was hard. It may have been harder for the producers, directors, the casting directors to actually eliminate people because you had so many people, and they would basically try to say, okay, well, if you have to be able to sing, dance, and act. If you can't do one of those things, well, you're cut. Now it's a matter of adding that extra thing where well, now you have to sing, dance, act, sometimes play an instrument, do gymnastics, and have a certain amount of followers. So it's really just allowed for, I think, producers and directors and casting directors to really kind of easily streamline their talent pool to a certain number. But it also really, it's forcing young talent to really go out there and be their own camera person, their own sound recording person, their own marketing person, their own, and literally that's a full-time job in itself.
yes,
You know, in terms of just making sure that you're filming every class, making sure that you have photo shoots on the street in fun locations, making sure that you are putting up content that is provocative enough sometimes to gain an audience, to encourage an audience, to keep an audience. So it's becoming a totally different business model.
yes, so exhausting as well now because you have to work on your art and you have to work on your social media and then try to do whatever you want to do in your life at the same time.
Exactly. You know, it's become a lot more intense because of all of the different parts that you now have to be responsible for. I mean, before, all I had to make sure is that I went to class every day and that I was properly trained. And then I went to voice class every day and I went to acting class, you know. So I had those 3 classes, but now you have to do all those 3 things. On top of that, you've got to actually understand technical parts of actually how to create, how to mic yourself, how to proper lighting for you to be able to know how to light, editing, because you have to edit the content that you're putting out there, and you've got to find interesting, innovative ways to keep an audience, to make yours more attractive or as attractive as somebody else's. So there's all these additional they're all artistic, which is a good thing, but all these additional responsibilities that you have to be able to be a viable candidate, to be a working professional. And it's very, very different, very, very different than when I was doing it. And I didn't have to worry about lighting and editing and sound and wardrobe and costuming and making sure I had enough, that I did a post today at a certain point in time. And oh, it's just, I mean, it's exhausting just to think about what they have to do these days. But again, I applaud them. I actually am very inspired by people who actually really are trying to pursue and make this an art form that they can make a living doing. And then just, you know, acknowledging that although it's different than our generation, every generation complains about previous generations or future generations in terms of what they're actually having to go through. And so I guess I'm on that bandwagon where I'm still so grateful and happy of when I actually was performing, you know, and actually, you know, really pursuing a career in the arts, you know, because I say it was easier. You know, but again, you know, dancers today don't necessarily have to, you know, they don't have to have high flexibility or high kicks or even do multiple turns anymore. It's just a very different, it's a very different art form in this commercial age as it was when I was dancing.
That's true. And yeah, I think there are advantages and disadvantages in everything. But in case of the social media, not more that you're complaining about what the kids are doing, but what they're asking of them. So there's also the difference.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, they don't even, I mean, very few times in a dance class these days, they don't even really give you a proper warm up. I don't understand how these young kids do this because but I do understand because they're not being asked to necessarily, you know, do like 3 pirouettes or 4 pirouettes and do jetés in the combination, because so they don't necessarily need to maybe be as technically warmed up as we were, but it still just amazes me that they're not prepared in case they do have to do. I mean, I saw Wicked in the movie theaters. There's some very technical stuff being shown in Wicked. You know, but it's again, it's just a different style of dance, a different way of moving that isn't the same. And I think it's demanding, but it's demanding in different ways.
Yeah, I think there is something missing in what there is being taught because hear a lot more about injuries or vocal difficulties because well, teaching singing has also changed a lot,
Yes.
and because I think because of that you hear a lot that well, there was a show that just started, but they only had 4 performances after the after the tryouts, and there are already people suffering from exhaustion. I think they're doing something wrong here somewhere.
Yes. Yes. I'll never forget when Gillian Lynn was actually she choreographed Cats. And the amount of effort that went into preparing us to do the ball, for example, during the rehearsal process, we would have to sing, I think, a part of Carmen and do sit-ups at the same time. Because she's like, you need to be able to have the stamina to get through the ball because it is the most exhausting choreography you'll probably ever do in your life. And so they made a point to, during the rehearsal process, to make sure that you had that ability. But now you have a 2-week rehearsal process or a 6-week rehearsal process at the most. And they don't necessarily prepare you for those kinds of things. Now, fortunately, in Broadway, you'll gain a reputation. So people who aren't really able to sustain vocally or sustain dance-wise usually probably won't be hired again, you know, until they actually repair that. So it's a matter of just really understanding that it is your obligation and responsibility as a performer to make sure that you can handle 8 shows a week. And I even know I have one of my best friends was a dancer also on Broadway, performer also on Broadway, who's now teaching. And at a certain point in his career, he did Lion King, he did Swan Lake, he did Boy from Oz. He did a lot of really great shows, but he was also very aware of what he was willing to do as he matured as a dancer and what he wasn't willing to do. So he would literally tell the choreographer, "I don't need to do that section. because I know that I'm not going to be able to do that 8 shows a week. So I'd rather just do a show, have a track that I can comfortably do, and know that I can execute 8 shows a week. And when I auditioned for Cats, for example, I had done everything to learn how to do a back handspring and gymnastics. I'll never forget, during the audition, they said, "Who does gymnastics? Raise your hand." And I raised my hand, and he says, "Who does gymnastics who wants to do it 8 shows a week? The same thing on a rake." I didn't raise my hand, because I was like, there's just no way that you can, you have to know yourself well enough to know what you're capable of, and what your limits are. And that's the thing. I think that a lot of young people don't really know what their limits are, because they've never really done it. And I had the opportunity when I was just starting out, after I did a chorus line. Actually, my first job, I did summer stock in 1983. And I'll never forget, because we did 6 shows, and literally while we're performing one show at night, we're rehearsing another show during the day for in 1 week, and putting that next show up. That was the most important learning experience of my career, because it taught you how to basically function, retain material, do something totally new that you had just learned a week prior, while you're doing another show and learning another show during the day. And for example, we had to do we did The Music Man with Van Johnson. We did Gypsy with Joan Rowley and her husband. I did Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. I did They're Playing Our Song. This was in the 80s, so these shows were still very popular during that time. But that was a really great experience, just understanding how important it is to actually know how to not only have the stamina to get to a performance, but how to just manage your energy level, so that you could actually sustain and rehearse all day, do a show at night, wake up the next day, do the same thing again, and literally have rotations of shows that are happening until you're done. And that was a tremendous learning experience. It was another world. That was in the 80s. So that was a while ago. They still, and then on top of it, in Sacramento Music Circus, it was an outdoor tent that was always at least 110 degrees at night.
Oh.
And I was wearing tweed costumes from My Fair Lady, for example, or Gypsy, that were just excruciatingly hot. But you had to go out there and do this choreography. So again, but it was the one moment, Dannii, that I will have to share, that was, I think, the epitome of me being able to manifest my future. I'll never forget walking off the stage, which was in the round, so it was a tent. It was like a circus tent, and walking off stage and going to the loading dock where all the sets were and all the costumes were, and thanking God that I was doing what I love to do, and that I was just so grateful to be doing what I wanted to do, and that I was making a living doing it. And I think that energy and that genuine gratitude for being in the position to be actually making my dream come true began a momentum that allowed it to sustain through the course of my entire career, which was very, very, I think was really, obviously, I was well trained. I was very, very, very inspired, very motivated, very, very willing to basically do anything, and I did, and I'm really really grateful that I had all the experiences that I had, Dannii. It was just really, I can't believe, it feels like another lifetime ago, actually. It feels like a full life in the arts that had its beginning, middle, and end, when it comes to a certain part of my career on stage that ended. And that it was totally okay with me. And people ask me all the time, do you miss it? Do you wish that you were still doing it? I'm like, no, I did everything I wanted to do. I really did. I did the Academy Awards. I choreographed for famous artists. I danced on Broadway. I did Broadway. I created a role on Broadway. I was able to teach all over the world and see the world while getting paid. and be introduced to all these different cultures, and just really have people literally from all over the world whose lives I've been able to touch, who have taught, who continue to pass on the information that I gave to them even while I was teaching. So it's interesting when you think about the ripple effect when it comes to when you cast a stone into a pond and it ripples and it keeps, and they say when you touch one person, they're going to touch another person. It's really, really true. From performances, people who saw Aida. I did a movie in the 80s. That's a cult classic. And I still get fan mail, as fan people coming that want to know more about that experience. And it's this ripple that just is never ending, even from my dad's career as a jazz musician. His music continues to touch and inspire generations of jazz musicians long after he left this planet. And so that's the exciting part of actually being involved in the arts and being able to touch people and serve a community as not only a performer, but also as an educator.
I mean, to have such a career and such a legacy to carry, it must be amazing, as you say. And what are some of your most exciting moments you remember as a teacher?
As a teacher, I'll share with you one of my most challenging and exciting moments, because it ended up becoming exciting. It was first very challenging. When I first got to Paris, I was first going because they had offered me a contract to teach at the Paris Centre, which was in Clichy. It's the biggest dance school in Paris, and I had already been teaching in Munich, in Germany, and I'd already started developing a reputation as a teacher. And I had arrived at the studio to talk to the owners, to the administration of the studio. And they said, "Yeah, we know we offered you a contract, but you can't teach here." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because we've had a lot of teachers coming from the States that say they have a certain level of training and experience, and it's not true. And we just have decided all of a sudden to just blanketly not have American teachers teach." And fortunately enough, there was a person who was doing a special stage in Paris that I was familiar with, had never taken her class before, Cecilia Marta, a dancer, an amazing dancer and dance educator out of New York. And I said, "Cecilia, do you mind if I just jump into your class and take your class? Because I'm here and I've always appreciated and heard about your classes and I've never taken it." She says, Sure, Phineas, be my guest. Come on in." So I went into their class, and literally during the middle of class, Dannii, more and more people from the upstairs started coming out and watching me in class. And at the end of the class, they says, "Okay, the administration wants you to come upstairs to their office." And I went upstairs and they says, "Okay, Phineas, you can teach." And I was like, "Okay." Okay. And I started in a small studio downstairs. They said, "Yeah, but we're going to give you a small studio downstairs." I was in that studio for about a month. And then my class got so large that they moved me into the big hall and the big studio. And it just kept growing and growing and growing until I was one of the most popular teachers during that time in Paris. But that was the most interesting and exciting introduction, because I didn't speak French when I first had gotten there. My former wife, like I said, we met in Paris. She's French, was Parisian born, and basically she was one of my students, and became just an amazing. She was definitely my greatest student in terms of just really just being a sponge. Whatever I would say to do, especially when it comes to pursuing dance as if you're an actor. When I would say, "I want you to cry during this, I want you to remember your first love during this, I want you to be angry and scream at the top of your lungs, and I want you to really scream in real life, not just dance scream, not just mime scream. I want you to scream." She did everything, Dannii. And she became my artistic muse. So everything I choreographed, everything I created was done on both of us. And it was really amazing, because that was another part of the exciting part of what happened after my original challenge of being in Paris, is that I was connected to Paris, and I knew before I knew when I was there, probably for even 6 months, I was like, I never want to not be attached to France, to Paris. I love this place. I love these people. And it didn't start that way, because I was literally, being told to get out of taxi cabs when I would try to speak to them in English when I was trying to navigate getting around. But I learned to love it, learned to speak the language well enough to actually teach in the language. But that was probably one of my most exciting and interesting experiences of my life, in my teaching career.
It's almost like a film, how you had to prove yourself, and of course you it sells soon enough. And what did you think when you first started? Did you think it would work, taking the class, and that they would see your abilities?
I didn't think about that at all. I just was like, let me just, I knew I needed to just find a way to just brush off the anger and the frustration that I had in the moment. So I just realized, I was like, the best thing for me to do is dance.
Yes.
The easiest way for me to get out of that energy and to get out of that funk and get out of that mindset is to just dance. And so I danced, and when I started seeing them come out on the top of the floor, of course I danced harder, because I was like, let me show you what it is that you're missing by not having me teach. And they were like, okay, we know that you're well trained, we know that you're a great dancer, we know that you're exciting and dynamic, and we're going to give you a chance. And I was like, that was after already having a contract to come to Paris to actually do it. And it being, again, one of the things that I've learned through the course of my career at Dannii is things are never as they seem. And you cannot just accept one answer, especially when you're told no. You've got to still pursue and still try to open up another door. You don't want to give. I never wanted to give up, and it was never even a part of my thought process to just give up and just walk away and just get a plane ticket back home. I was like, oh no, I'm going to make this work. I don't know how it's going to work. It's just going to work. And eventually, like I say, I mean, sometimes it happens faster than others. That day, it happened that day after that class. Other times, I've had to wait longer for it to be revealed how it can be working out. But one of the things I have learned, Dannii, is that things are never as they seem, and never be attached to outcomes of what you think things should look like, because they will always possibly be better than your wildest dreams if you actually stay in there.
Is there anything you wish you could have done or missed out on?
Not really. Obviously, I would have loved to have earned a Tony. I still think that it's a possibility. Um, I also write music. I wrote a musical based on The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, which was really exciting, and it still possibly has a future. So there's a possibility that will be able to work itself out. But again, one of the things, again, I have no attachment to outcomes anymore. Again, originally when I first set my first intention at 5 years old to be doing this as a profession, I did it. And I was able to make a living doing it, and was able to touch a lot of lives doing it, and still able to touch a lot of lives doing it. That I have no regrets. I have no unresolved, achievements that I wish. I achieved a lot more than I ever thought I would. I never thought when I first started working that I'd be a dance teacher, that I'd be teaching music, that I'd be teaching acting, that I'd be coaching people on how to audition. But it's what I've learned how to do, and I've learned that I'm actually a very good educator, artistic, creative educator, and more than anything, I'm a great cheerleader when it comes to really giving my students the confidence that they need to be able to walk into a room and actually get a job. Because oftentimes a lot of artists are insecure. Most artists, I would think, are insecure, which is why we need an audience to applaud and applaud and validate us, because we feel better about ourselves and we feel like, okay, I guess I'm not so bad because they're standing or they're applauding for me or they're screaming. But the reality is that most artists inherently are insecure. And it is something very exciting to be able to actually walk somebody who's insecure with their abilities and their talents and allow them to actually really let that go and step into the fullness of their potential and actually really realize their dreams that they would sometimes or have been taught by their parents are impossible. And it's really fulfilling. I mean, I'll share another one of the experiences I had as a teacher that was really great. Is that when I had my own dance studio in Redondo Beach, in California, part of Los Angeles, I set out to have a dance studio because I really wanted to be able to see what kind of an impact I could have on my students. I'd always taught in other people's studios, and so the studio would always get the recognition by presenting these dancers to the community. And actually, when a dancer booked a job, the studio would get kind of like the endorsement of saying, yeah, they came out of my school. But all the students that I was having in those schools would always say I was the most influential teacher that they had. And I was like, well, let me just see if I do this on my own, what I can produce. And I was able to actually create some really amazing students that became some of our world-renowned choreographers. Brian Friedman, um, Andre Fuentes, who choreographed for Britney Spears, won an MTV Music Award for Womanizer, danced with Britney from the very beginning, choreographed for Prince, who was one of my biggest idols and inspirations. He choreographed for Prince, had a working relationship with Prince, and became this world-renowned choreographer and teacher. And when I would watch him teach Dannii, it was like watching myself. It was so inspiring and so motivating and so fulfilling because I saw that what I was able to give to him, he was able to give to others. And even Brian Friedman, he's one of the choreographers for the X Factor in London.
Yes.
Yeah, he's very famous in Europe and the UK. And I was his first jazz teacher in LA when he was 11 years old.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's allowed me, teaching has afforded me the opportunity to be able to motivate and inspire young people to go out and achieve their dream, and that probably is more exciting and important to me than my own personal career. I mean, I love doing it, but I realize that when you're on stage and performing, a part of it is kind of like self-serving. You're really, I mean, obviously you're doing it for the audience and you're appreciating that they're there. But when you're teaching, it is a very different connection to the person because it's one-on-one. And every single student in your class will learn a different way. So that means that as a teacher, you have to be able to find different ways of telling people how to do a pirouette or how to do a jump. It's not every student will understand and retain the information the same way. And so you have to really be connected spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically to that person's energy to be able to know how to get them to achieve what it is that you want them to achieve. And that is more, it's harder, it's more difficult, but it's also a lot more rewarding because when you actually have spent that kind of an invested amount of energy and time and see somebody do a double pirouette for the first time and not fall down, or do a jeté and split their legs and be able to actually recover nicely, or do a combination, actually understand emotionally where it is and actually cry and still be able to tell the story. It's just the most fulfilling thing I've ever experienced, Dannii. It's just one of the best parts of being a dance educator or being an educator of any style. I'm working with a young singer now, and I'm giving her coaching on performance coaching. And this is somebody who was trained technically, was given voice performance, but never in performance, never really how to tell the story to the song. It was all about how to sing the note, how to make sure the note is proper, and that your control is proper, and that your tone is proper, and that your pitch is proper, and that your breath support is proper, but never really about the lyrics and how to actually have a connection to the lyrics to actually tell a story. And working with her has been very, again, fulfilling because it reminds me of how much I love to teach and how much I have to offer to a student who is pursuing this in a way that they want to be a professional. And she's got all the technical ability vocally in the world, but I realized that she didn't have necessarily the the performance part of it to really actually pursue a professional career. And being able to actually give her that tool is very exciting. And I cannot wait to see what she's able to do with the information I'm giving to her.
I saw your site, one of your students also worked with Michael Jackson.
Yes, oh yeah. Many of my students worked with Michael Jackson. Courtney Miller, he was out of my dance studio. He worked with Michael Jackson. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's just like, they say 6 degrees of separation. It's more like 2 degrees of separation. So even though I auditioned for Michael Jackson, never worked with him, but I've had students that have worked with him. I've had students that have worked with his choreographers. I've never worked with this choreographer, with Vince Patterson, for example. But I had students, even Andre, works with Vince Patterson. I've had many students who've worked with these choreographers that I may not have worked with, but I taught them to be able to actually work with people like that. So I feel indirectly, I worked with those people as well.
Well, that must be such a cool memory, because that means you were that good that they got those jobs.
Yes, and even Janet Jackson, she's another person. One of her choreographers and one of my students from before I had my own dance studio was Shanice Hurd, who was her choreographer for many years, was also one of her dancers for many years, who's pursuing an amazing career, as she continues to educate dancers. And that's the thing that I'm noticing a lot, is that a lot of the dancers that I have taught have decided to go into that as well and be very successful being dance educators. And that's, again, very inspiring, because a lot of those people have had students that have gone in to be dance educators as well. So it's one of those amazing abilities to just connect the dots and realize the ripples of your original, the rock that you threw into the pond, and it never ends. It's never ending.
Passing it on is so great. What would you say to people who would go into want to go to dancing or theater in the future?
I would just say, the more you are ready in terms of dance technique, vocal technique, acting technique. If you can play an instrument, do that. If you can do gymnastics, do that. The more things that you can add to things that you've mastered, the better. And again, really more than anything, only imagine success. Only imagine it already happening, because a lot of times when you walk into a room with 500 other people, regardless of what you think you're emitting to the casting table or to the people who are watching, they know any doubts that you have in terms of inside of you, whether it's a doubt that was placed inside of you by your parents, by them telling you need to have a plan B, you need to basically go to college and get a degree so that you always have a way to make money. All of those doubts, if you've got them, are going to translate energetically in your performance. So you really have to go into every audition, every opportunity to show yourself without any inhibitions or any doubt of who you are, of what you can do, and how well you can do it. One of the benefits of growing up in LA was being around people like Lenny Kravitz. I grew up in a boy choir. Lenny Kravitz and we met when we were 11 years old. His mom was on the Jeffersons at the time, and his mom was an extremely important mentor for both of us and all of us, because she said, you know what, no matter what, you're going to always have a door that's open to you, but you've got to be able to have the talent to stay in the room. You've got to be able to have the talent, and you have to know your craft well enough to stay in the room. You cannot you cannot kind of know it. You have to really know it. So when the door does open, you are able to basically provide what it is that is needed, and that without a shadow of a doubt that you are able to do it. And that was one of the most important lessons that I was received before I even began to audition. I was like, okay, I really have to master this. And Lenny was taking drum lessons, guitar lessons, was doing everything that was possible. We were studying voice through the boy choir. We got a lot of our same musical foundational, information from that experience. But again, we knew the importance of mastering our craft. And we knew that no matter how many opportunities we're going to have, the only way that we could actually sustain and have a performing career that was going to be worth our livelihoods was basically knowing that we knew and had mastered what it was that we were supposed to master.
Oh, absolutely true. And I thank you so much for this interview and your inspiring, beautiful words. And well, you basically have been teaching now, because everyone who will watch this will get so much information and great wisdom with them.
Well, it's my pleasure. Again, I love the artistic community. They're my family. And I obviously every show I've ever done, it feels like you have a new family. Every at the end of every contract, at the end of every show run, you just leave going, oh, I left with the best friends that I'm still in touch with the people that I definitely consider to be my most supportive support system. And I think in the arts community, I think there's just there's an affinity and a connection artistically and creatively that we all have. And another point that I just want to also just leave your viewership with is just that if you're creative and if you're an artist, it is our direct connection to the most highest divine element on the planet. And if you are able to be creative, you can surpass your depression. You can surpass your greatest fears, your frustration, your anger, by just allowing yourself for that moment to actually just leave whatever is going on in your life and do something creative to just change and elevate your energy and your frequency. It's just it is the greatest blessing and greatest gift that I've realized in the last few years, that we have as an artistic community, to be able to just transcend all the chaos that's happening in the world today. And there's lots of chaos happening, but all we have to do, Dannii, is be creative, to be actually able to recognize and see really the truth of really who we are is embedded in our creative spirit, because it really is. It is divine. It is really allowing us to connect to something much greater than our physical selves, our spiritual selves. So I really do want everybody who's watching this, who is an artist, to know that when in doubt, dance. When in doubt, sing. When in doubt, play your instrument. When in doubt, draw. When in doubt, or when in depression, find something creative to do. Find something creative to do.
Absolutely. And that's well, a message to us all. And even if you're not actively in art, but just as a hobby, it brings so much joy for people.
Yeah, and again, our it's not just in the arts that we create. Any creative modality, whether it is cooking, whether it is construction, when anything that allows you to create is
Yes.
going to take you out of that. So it's not just for performing arts. It's for anybody who is. We are creative beings. We are creative beings. All of us. Everybody on the planet is. But again, like I say, the best way to change your energy and your frequency and the vibe of what's going on around you, if you're living in a world that you think is full of despair and chaos, the only way to actually quiet that world is to do something creative. And that may mean baking a pie. That may mean, building a piece of furniture. That may be, whatever you're doing to creative energy is a divine energy. And I really do encourage everybody to recognize the potential of changing their circumstances or their environment or their energy by just creating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.